My friends, please subscribe to my channel, like the video and write a comment, and we begin. Part 1. The Gilded Cage. He said I wasn't his responsibility. The words hung in the air, thick and heavy, like smoke after a fire. They still cling to the corners of my mind, a relentless echo in the hollow chambers of what used to be us. Liam. Just the name feels like a phantom limb, a painful reminder of something lost, something I thought I knew. For a year and a half, he was everything. My sun, my moon, my damn North Star. It sounds pathetic now, I know. From the outside, we were a masterpiece of aspirational living, the kind of couple that made other couples envious. We were regulars on the social circuit, gliding effortlessly through art openings and charity galas. We knew the right people, dropped the right names, laughed at the right jokes, always with a perfectly calibrated balance of charm and self-deprecation. Our apartment, a sprawling loft in Tribeca, was a testament to this carefully curated existence. Walls painted in muted grays, adorned with abstract art that probably meant more than I understood, but looked stunning in photos. A kitchen designed for gourmet meals that we rarely cooked, instead opting for reservations at the latest hot spot. It was all so perfect. The kind of perfection that felt suffocating. We had a routine. Coffee at the same trendy cafe every Saturday morning. Sunday brunch with his parents, where I would expertly navigate their subtle barbs and thinly veiled judgments. Evenings spent networking, which usually meant schmoozing with his colleagues at some overpriced cocktail bar. I played my part flawlessly. The supportive girlfriend, the witty conversationalist, the effortlessly chic companion. But behind the perfectly posed Instagram shots, behind the dazzling smiles plastered across our faces, there was this emptiness, this cavernous void that grew wider with each passing day. I poured every ounce of my energy into that relationship, painstakingly building my world around his ambitions, his preferences, his needs. I convinced myself that our lives were intrinsically linked, that his success was my success, his happiness my happiness. I thought I was his responsibility, not in a burdensome way, but in the beautiful, intertwined way that lovers should be. Then came the night of the Metropolitan Museum Gala. The theme was avant-garde. I wore a stunning, albeit ridiculously uncomfortable, crimson gown that Liam had insisted I get. He even picked it out himself. It should have been the highlight of my year. I should have been radiating joy. But that night, something shifted. Liam was different, distant. His eyes seemed to glaze over whenever I spoke, as if he was listening to a radio station I couldn't tune into. He barely touched me, barely acknowledged my presence. I brushed it off as stress, maybe work-related tension. But as the night wore on, the coldness radiating from him became impossible to ignore. We argued, a hushed and tense whisper fight in the hallway outside the ballroom. He accused me of being too needy, of not understanding his priorities. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. 2 days later, he called me into the living room. He didn't meet my eyes. He simply stated, in a voice devoid of emotion, "This isn't working." And then, the words that would haunt me for months to come, the words that shattered my carefully constructed reality. "I'm not responsible for you, Sarah." The breakup was brutal, abrupt, and utterly devastating. He packed his things within hours. He left a note on the kitchen counter, a sterile and impersonal goodbye that read like a business memo. The silence that followed his departure was deafening. I was alone in that cavernous loft, surrounded by reminders of a life that had vanished in an instant. I didn't understand. How could someone who had sworn I was the one, someone who had painted a picture of a future filled with shared dreams and intertwined destinies, just discard me like a broken toy? How could someone I thought I knew so intimately become a complete stranger? I was lost, adrift in a sea of confusion and despair, with no land in sight. And, most terrifying of all, I had no idea who I was without him. Part 2, The Driftwood. The world, once vibrant and full of promise, transformed into a monochrome painting after Liam left. I felt like driftwood, tossed and turned by the capricious, unforgiving waves of emotion. One moment I'd be drowning in a sea of crushing sadness, the next swept up by a current of incandescent rage. The simplest tasks became monumental efforts. The mundane details of life, brushing my teeth, making coffee, choosing an outfit, were suddenly insurmountable obstacles. The apartment, once a symbol of our shared success, felt like a gilded cage, each perfectly placed object a cruel reminder of what I'd lost. My friends, bless their loyal hearts, rallied around me in those initial days, weeks even. They arrived at my doorstep armed with casseroles, bottles of wine, and an arsenal of well-intentioned platitudes. "He wasn't worth it, Sarah," they'd declare, their voices filled with a mix of concern and exasperation, as they clutched my hand and offered me tissues. "You're so much better off. You'll find someone who appreciates you." Their words, though spoken with genuine care, felt like hollow echoes in the vast emptiness within me. They didn't take root in the barren landscape of my grief. They couldn't soothe the raw, pulsating ache that throbbed in my chest, a constant reminder of the wound he had inflicted. I'd spend hours, days even, huddled on the sofa, staring blankly at my reflection in the darkened television screen. My gaze, usually sharp and inquisitive, became vacant and lost. I'd pick apart every detail of our relationship, searching for clues, for a single thread I could pull to unravel the mystery of why he'd left. What had I done wrong? Where had I failed? Was I not beautiful enough? Not interesting enough? Not smart enough? The questions, relentless and self-destructive, hammered at my self-esteem, chipping away at the already fragile foundation of my identity. My career, which had once been a source of pride and a validation of my ambition, took a nosedive. The creative spark that had fueled my marketing campaigns flickered and died. I lost interest in everything. The vibrant colors of the world seemed to have faded, replaced by a dull, lifeless gray. The meetings I used to thrive in now felt like tedious obligations. The brainstorming sessions that once excited me now induced a wave of nausea. The competitive drive that had always propelled me forward evaporated. I couldn't focus, couldn't concentrate. My work became sloppy, my deadlines missed. The promotions and awards that had once been within reach now seemed a distant memory. Even the simple joys of life, the laughter of a good friend, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee, the warmth of the sun on my skin, felt muted, distant, as if perceived through a thick veil of sorrow. The laughter of my friends, once a source of comfort and delight, now felt forced, unnatural. The joy of a good meal felt replaced by a feeling of hollowness. The joy of the simple things in life, like a walk in the park or an evening spent reading, felt like a distant memory. The world, once a source of endless possibilities, became a landscape of pain. I withdrew from everything, isolating myself in a self-imposed exile. I canceled plans, avoided phone calls, and let emails pile up unanswered in my inbox. I stopped leaving the apartment unless absolutely necessary. The outside world felt too bright, too loud, too full of reminders of a life that was no more. I stopped seeing my friends, stopped answering calls. I felt like I didn't deserve their love or concern. I was just existing, a shell of the woman I once was, simply waiting for the next wave of despair to crash over me. I was drowning slowly and silently. It was during one of these depths of despair, on a day where I found myself curled on the couch, sobbing uncontrollably, that my sister, Chloe, a therapist, found me. She walked into my apartment, her face a mask of concern and understanding. She didn't lecture, didn't offer empty platitudes. She simply sat beside me, wrapped an arm around my shoulders, and said, her voice soft but firm, "Sarah, you need to talk to someone. And I know just the person." Her words were a lifeline, a small flicker of hope in the vast, suffocating darkness. Part 3. The Guiding Light. That someone Chloe spoke of was Dr. Emily Carter. The moment I walked into Emily's sun-drenched office, a sense of calm, an unfamiliar but welcome feeling, washed over me. The space itself was soothing, a sanctuary of neutral tones, soft lighting, and the subtle scent of essential oils. There were no harsh fluorescent lights, no sterile, clinical vibes. Just an oversized, inviting armchair and a sense of quiet understanding. From the first session, I felt a shift, a subtle but significant tremor in the foundations of my despair. Emily was a woman of remarkable presence. She had kind eyes, a warm smile, and a voice that was both calming and direct. She was also a remarkably perceptive individual, possessing this uncanny ability to see right through the carefully constructed defenses I had built around my heart. She didn't sugarcoat anything, didn't offer platitudes. Instead, she listened with unwavering attention, her gaze fixed on me, absorbing every word, every gesture, every unspoken emotion. Our sessions weren't solely focused on Liam, though he was, understandably, a central figure in the beginning. Emily helped me unpack the layers of my relationship, dissecting it piece by piece like a meticulous surgeon. She guided me in unraveling the tangled web of codependency, the unhealthy patterns I had developed, the way I had allowed my sense of self to become inextricably linked to Liam's approval and validation. It was a painful process, a deep dive into the murky depths of my own insecurities, but it was also, I realized, necessary. We delved into my past, exploring my childhood, my relationships with my parents, the influences that had shaped me into the woman I was. We explored the unspoken messages I had internalized, the beliefs about love and worthiness that had been etched into my subconscious. I learned that my desperate need for Liam's affirmation stemmed from a deep-seated insecurity, a persistent whisper in the back of my mind that told me I wasn't worthy of love or happiness on my own, that I needed external validation to feel complete, that I was somehow flawed, broken. The origins of my patterns, it turned out, went way back into childhood. Emily didn't just offer generic advice. She equipped me with tools, practical strategies to navigate the emotional minefield I was traversing. She introduced me to mindfulness techniques, teaching me how to quiet the incessant chatter of my mind and to become present in the moment. She encouraged me to practice self-compassion, to treat myself with the same kindness and understanding I would offer a dear friend. She provided me with affirmations, positive statements designed to challenge the negative self-talk that had plagued me for so long. She gave me exercises, homework, to challenge and dismantle my limiting beliefs, to question the narratives I had created about myself. The work was hard, incredibly hard. There were days when I left her office feeling raw, exposed, and utterly exhausted. There were moments when I wanted to give up, to retreat back into the familiar comfort of my despair. But Emily, with her unwavering support and encouragement, gently guided me forward. She celebrated my small victories, acknowledged my setbacks, and always reminded me of my strength and resilience. Slowly, painstakingly, the pieces began to fit. The fog in my mind began to lift. I started to see glimmers of the person I used to be, the vibrant, independent woman Liam had, either consciously or unconsciously, snuffed out. I began to feel a flicker of hope, a tiny ember of belief that maybe, just maybe, I could find happiness and fulfillment on my own. I began to remember myself, and to feel joy again. Part 4, The Crossroads. Then came the turning point, a moment that crystallized everything I had been working towards. We were in a session, discussing my lingering insecurities, the ways in which I still measured my worth against Liam's or anyone else's approval. Emily asked a question, a simple yet profound query that sliced through my carefully constructed facade and stopped me dead in my tracks. "What do you want, Sarah?" The question hit me with the force of a physical blow. It felt jarring, almost alien. The concept itself was foreign. For so long, I had lived in reactive mode, making decisions based on external validation. Based on what Liam wanted. What would make him happy? What was expected of me? I had become a chameleon, adapting my personality, my desires, my very essence, to fit the mold that I thought would guarantee acceptance and love. I had, in essence, forgotten how to listen to myself, to my own inner voice. I had lost sight of my own dreams, my own passions, my own inherent worth. The question, "What do you want?" ignited an internal conflict, a battle within the walls of my mind. A battle I wasn't sure I was ready to fight. But the question, in its simple clarity, sparked something within me. It was a seed of rebellion, a whisper of self-discovery, the first tentative steps towards reclaiming my agency. I began to consider my life, to critically assess my choices. I began to think about my job, the soul-crushing marketing position that had once seemed so glamorous. The long hours, the constant pressure to perform, the superficiality of the industry. I started to consider my friends, the ones who genuinely cared about me, the ones who saw through my facade. And then, my thoughts drifted to my dormant interests, the passions I had abandoned in the pursuit of Liam's happiness, my love for art, for literature, for the quiet satisfaction of creating something with my own hands. It was then that I made the difficult, but ultimately liberating decision to quit my job. The paychecks were appealing, but the unhappiness was taking a toll. The soul-crushing monotony had finally become unbearable. I needed a change. I needed to reclaim my time, my energy, my life. I needed to rediscover my purpose. My friends were horrified by my decision. Liam's voice, like a ghost, echoed in my mind as I handed in my notice. However, I knew this was the right path. The joy I felt was so powerful, so motivating, that all the doubts were crushed. Emboldened by this first step, I started exploring other avenues. I enrolled in an advanced degree program in the field of art history, something I had always dreamt of doing. I dove headfirst into the subject. I enrolled in a pottery class, finding solace and creative release in the tactile process of shaping clay, the messy beauty of creating something tangible from nothing. I started volunteering at an animal shelter, finding purpose and unconditional love in the care of abandoned animals. Every step I took was a conscious choice, a testament to my growing independence. Every decision, every action was my own. And with each one, I felt a surge of empowerment, a newfound sense of control over my life. A quiet confidence blossomed within me. A confidence that had been buried for years, suffocated by the weight of expectations and the relentless pressure to conform. However, a small, persistent shadow lingered in the corners of my mind. Sometimes, late at night, the image of Liam would flash across my thoughts. I would wonder what he was doing, where he was, if he had moved on. And I'll admit, there was a flicker of curiosity, a small part of me that wondered if he had realized his mistake. Had he learned from his actions? Had he changed? Had he, too, embarked on a journey of self-discovery? The thought of him, his presence, his voice, was still capable of sending a shiver down my spine, a sharp pang of longing. But the feeling was fading, receding in the face of my own growing strength. He was now a ghost, a shadow. I was the writer of my own story. Part 5: The Dawn. The truth is, there was a moment, a fleeting instance of vulnerability, when I felt tempted to reach out to Liam. It was a random Tuesday afternoon. I was leaving my pottery class, my hands still dusty with clay, and as I stepped onto the sun-drenched sidewalk, I saw him. He was standing across the street, looking slightly disheveled, his gaze fixed on the window of the cafe. The years hadn't been particularly kind to him, I thought. He looked older, the sharpness around his jaw softened, as if the pressures of the world had finally taken their toll. He was in the middle of a conversation, and I could see that the words didn't flow as easily as they used to. As I approached, I saw the faint lines of recognition flicker across his face. He seemed to be searching for words to say, his mouth opening and closing as if he were trying to grasp at something just beyond his reach. The air around us crackled with unspoken questions, with the weight of the past that he had left behind. However, before he could formulate a sentence, before I could even utter his name, another figure emerged from the cafe. A woman tall and elegant, with a cascade of auburn hair and a smile that lit up her entire face. She draped her arm around his, her touch filled with a familiar warmth. He turned to her, his face softening, and introduced her. His fiancée. The world seemed to tilt on its axis for a brief, agonizing moment. A wave of conflicting emotions, surprise, disappointment, a strange sense of relief washed over me. It was as though a tightly wound spring inside me had suddenly snapped. The what-ifs, the could-have-beens, the remnants of the past, dissipated in a breath. I looked at the couple and saw the look of love in her eyes. It was the look of someone safe, cared for. As I watched her, I felt a sense of peace that transcended the pain. Before his name could even cross my lips, before the cascade of memories and questions could overwhelm me, I turned and walked away. I walked towards a life of my own choosing, a life that had been built on my own terms. A life where I was not defined by anyone else's expectations. A life that was my own responsibility. In that moment, the past began to fade. The years of therapy, the countless hours spent processing my emotions, the self-discovery, the growth, had all led me to this point. Through counseling, I had not only survived the trauma of the breakup, but I had also discovered a happier, more fulfilling path for myself. I had learned that true happiness wasn't about external validation, about finding a partner to complete me. It was about the internal work. It was about the choices I made and taking ownership of my decisions. It was about cultivating self-love, self-respect, and self-worth. It was about embracing my imperfections and celebrating my strengths. It was not Liam's choice to love me, to support me, or to be there for me. He taught me that, in the most brutal of ways. He made me realize that it was my responsibility to love myself, to support myself, to create the life I wanted and the life I deserved. He had given me the tools to be an independent woman. The lingering pain, the residual sting of betrayal, began to dissolve, replaced by a quiet strength. I was no longer the woman who was defined by her relationships, by the opinions of others. I was no longer the victim. As I walked, I realized that Liam wasn't just a lover. He was a catalyst. He had pushed me, unintentionally, to confront my deepest fears, to challenge my limiting beliefs, to rediscover the woman I had lost. Now, when those words, "I'm not responsible," echoed in my memory, they no longer cut me. They served as a reminder of my resilience, my capacity for growth, and the beautiful, independent woman I had become. I didn't see Liam again after that day. I will never be able to know what he has become. I will always remember the good times, the bad times, and everything in between. However, I was able to move forward and embrace the person I had become. I no longer saw a monster in him, but instead, a fellow survivor of the human condition. I silently wished him and his fiancée all the best, a quiet blessing for their future. I had something even more precious now, myself. And as I stood in the golden light of that afternoon, the pottery class, the upcoming program, the new life I knew, with absolute certainty, that I was finally truly home. I was, for the first time in a very long time, free. The dawn had broken, and it illuminated a future that was bright with promise.